We're gonna make you sweat, see, so just sit here and wait.
Nicer in here than that side.
Okay, I guess let's go ahead and get started. Did you hit record, Brandon?
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Chairman Thomas. I'd like to welcome everybody to the North Ogden City Planning Commission meeting, July 6th, 2022. We'll begin our meeting with an invocation or a thought from Commissioner Webb, followed which being led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Nan Carroll.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful to be here as a city. We're grateful for the beautiful place that we live in. We're grateful for just the many blessings we have. We're grateful that we've been able to celebrate our independence this week and pray for our service members and veterans. They will know how much we appreciate them. And you see, just saying in Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Webb, for jumping on the spot. I didn't notice it's assigned to Mason, so he owes you one. All right, we'll make note that Commissioner Mason and Commissioner Barker are excused today. Item number 2, minutes consideration. Consideration and action to approve the May 4th and June 1st, 2022 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Any corrections or items of concern with the minutes?
I'll make a motion that we approve both the May 4th and June 1st, 22 Planning Commission meetings.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, our opening meeting statement. Before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be opened for other speakers. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any other interested person will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, e.g. pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be left with the commission. Speakers are required to have signed in at the door and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, then state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address the commission from the podium or microphone and shall address all comments to the Planning Commission. And please silence your phones. Do we have any ex parte communications or conflicts on the agenda tonight? Any commissioners? All right, public comments. Now's the time if you're here to speak to the Planning Commission for an item that is not on the agenda. We invite you to step up to the podium and do so at this time. All right, we'll move on to our administrative items. We've had a request that we move item number 7 and 6 around. We've got our, who's with us that you need?
Our
Parks Director
may be online with us.
She is.
Is she on? Okay. And she's got another meeting that may conflict, so we're going to move that item first. So we need a motion to amend the agenda, switching items 7 and 6.
I make a motion that we switch items 6 and 7, addressing item 7 prior to item 6.
A second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so our modified agenda, item number 6, previously labeled as 7, Subdivision ordinance 2021-12. Consideration and action regarding an administrative application for final approval of the Northview Estates subdivision phase 9. It's a 29 lot subdivision located at approximately 600 East and Mountain Road. Presenter is Brandon Bell, our associate planner. Brandon?
Thank you, Chair. And one additional correction to what's stated on the agenda. This item should be considered for preliminary approval and not final. That was a mistake that was on the agenda and on the staff report. We caught that earlier today. So please reflect that it would be preliminary in any motion that was made approving it.
All right, Cecil.
So again, this is a 29 lot subdivision. It's about 12.24 acres of land that is being proposed to be developed as a single family subdivision. It's located approximately 600 East Mountain Road. And the applicant has been working with city staff to get to the point of coming before the commission to request preliminary approval. The property on which it's located is currently vacant, and the current zoning is HP1. The technical review committee met on November 8th of last year regarding this proposed subdivision, and the city engineer, who's here with us tonight as well, submitted a review memo dated June 29th of this year, so just last week or so. That and then we've also received a will serve letter for the Central Weaver Sewer and for secondary water for the subdivision. The HP1 zone in which this property is located requires a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet on interior lots, and 11 lots, or sorry, corner lots are required to be 11,000 square feet. The lot width requirement at the 30-foot setback is 90 feet. The lots in this proposed subdivision have been verified by staff to meet the required square footage and lot width requirements for building lots in this proposed zone, the HP1 zone. And due to the timing of the application for this subdivision, we recently had a reorganization of our zoning code. And however, this application originally came in prior to that reorganization and that adoption of that reorganized code. And so there are some adjustments in the code. This falls under the prior version of the code, and that applies to one section or provision of the code in particular, which the prior version of the code under the block length requirement allows for there to be exceptions to the block length due to topography, given steep slopes present on the north side of the property. Both sides of the road that are being proposed for the subdivision would be slightly over the block length, at least on the west side. I think it was 1350 and the maximum is 1320. The applicant has worked with city staff, however, they looked at two different alternatives to try and propose roads that would allow it to meet the block length requirement. And I believe those are included as one of the, it's Exhibit E that shows the two different alternatives that would cut in above Mountain Road around where parcel A is at. And so, but the slopes on those two roads were above what was considered acceptable to the city engineer. And so staff is comfortable supporting the exemption from the block length requirement as that's allowed in city code, and felt that the slope of the roads should take precedence in this case. And then on the west side, that's also indirectly affected by that topography. I don't have my pointer, but if you look at the intersection on the, sorry, I keep saying west, but I should be saying south. The south side of Mountain Road, the intersections need to line up, and so there's a safety issue. And then there's also development to the west of this development that's existing, or sorry, to the south of this development that's existing, that in order to get a safe road curvature and meet that other portion of the road, that block needs to be slightly over the block length as well. And so staff feels that these exemptions are justified given the topographical conditions. And there is an exhibit from our city engineer that includes both the applicant's request for that block length exemption as well as his response supporting that, witnessing that he believes it's justified. He's here if you have any questions on that. He can clarify if I'm not representing accurately. The applicant is planning to install a 10-foot wide asphalt pedestrian walkways on parcels A and B to compensate for the length of the blocks that will be created on these two lots. It's our anticipation that I believe it's on parcel A on the east that that we would potentially seek for that to go through when development is completed on the other side, so that would lessen the impact of the block length exception, so that people could walk through the block to the other side, the street on the other side. So and staff recommends those 10-foot wide asphalt pedestrian walkways on both parcel A and B to compensate for the length of the blocks that will be created on these two lots. This subdivision is located in a critical area for the city's trail network. There is a requirement in this area in the general plan for a trail on Mountain Road. And the design of Mountain Road currently includes bike lanes on both sides of the street, a 6-foot asphalt trail on the north side, and a 5-foot sidewalk on the south side. The right-of-way design will be consistent all along all of the unconstructed portions of Mountain Road. And the right-of-way design also includes 11-foot travel lanes, parking on both sides, and 2 5-foot bike lanes. So currently, as I just stated, the 6-foot asphalt trail on the north side is required by our public works standards. That specifically they'd be 6 foot in width and it'd be asphalt. In times past, there's been a little bit more flexibility with regards to the design of the trail, but it's currently codified essentially in our public works standards that it'd be 6-foot asphalt. The reasoning behind that is that we've had sort of some erosion of what qualified as a trail and that the standard for a trail. And so staff has seen it to be fitting to try and put that in the public works standards. So that when we ask for a trail and when we require a trail, we actually get something that reasonably qualifies as a trail. However, recently in the last few days, staff has had conversations with the applicant. He has some concerns with requiring asphalt specifically due to the location of the trail in the front yards and intersecting with the driveways. I'm happy he'll obviously have time to speak. He can share those concerns in more detail. I do know that there's the backdrop of staff has our own point of view where there's concerns about the usability of trails and the designs that have been used in the past that have been either just concrete or widened concrete at 6 feet have not registered in the public's minds as trails. And they don't tend to get the same degree of use as asphalt trails. They also they don't there's bike lanes in the right-of-way design that are in the street and on the asphalt, but they're not as usable or safe for younger users of trails, children, families with children, things like that. And so the Parks and Recreation Director does feel strongly that we either stick with the 6-foot wide asphalt trail in the current location, or that the applicant be allowed to pursue an adjustment to that requirement for this to apply to this subdivision by way of working with the city council to adjust the public works standards to come up with another suitable option. So one option that's been considered in the past has been colored concrete. There's a significant amount of support for that option. There's also our concerns among different parties. And so that's one potential option forward. So that would be one way in which it could potentially be, the public works standards could be potentially adjusted. But the idea is to try and find, if someone wants to move away from the asphalt, to find a suitable alternative that still registers as a trail in the minds of the public, and that would be start to be a consistent standard for trails in the city. There's been, in addition to the erosion of the trail standard and not being recognizable, there's been inconsistency in the past as to what what was used as a standard for a trail. So hope I got all that issue out correctly. And we do have, again, our Parks and Recreation Director available if she feels the need to share any comments or clarify anything that I've stated. The notes on the plat regarding the typical public utility easement need to ensure that sidewalk repair, construction, and reconstruction are included as part of the purpose and use of that easement. In the past, we've had sometimes two easements overlapping, and we think this is a way to simplify that so that we could just use our public utility easements to repair sidewalks as well without exceeding the scope of those easements. So the summary of the Planning Commission's considerations for this would be: does the proposed subdivision meet the requirements of the applicable city subdivision and zoning ordinances? And is the proposed subdivision consistent with the general plan? The proposed subdivision meets the requirements of the applicable North Ogden City ordinances and conforms to the North Ogden City general plan with the requirements noted in this report. This area is in the hillside neighborhood, and the general plan map calls for this property to be developed as low density residential. And the recommended conditions of approval are specifically that the requirements of the North Ogden City's engineers report be met prior to final plat approval, except where potentially superseded in this report. The requirements of the technical review committee letter, except where it may be potentially superseded in this report. A 5-foot sidewalk needs to be built on the south side of Mountain Road, of the south side of the Mountain Road right of way, and a 6-foot asphalt trail along the north side of Mountain Road, unless an adjustment to this requirement to be applied to this subdivision is pursued by working with City Council to adjust the public works standards. Additionally, a 10-foot walkway needs to be built on, and that's asphalt as well. 10-foot asphalt walkway needs to be built on parcels A and B. And then the notes on the plat or plans regarding the typical public utility easement needs to ensure that sidewalk repair, construction, and reconstruction are included as part of the purpose and use of the easement. So staff recommends that the Planning Commission grant preliminary approval of the Northview Estates Phase 9 subdivision subject to the conditions mentioned in the staff report. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have at this time.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First one, the issue that you described about the block length exemption, would that be included in any motion under bullet 1, the requirements of the engineer's report? You said that was, or does that need to be mentioned separately? Because I think you said it was the city engineer's recommendation as well. So would that be covered in the engineer's report?
I personally don't think it actually needs to be mentioned because
Okay.
it's encoded in the design, so to speak.
Okay.
But that's a great question.
The second question I had was the asphalt versus say, concrete or something. In terms of the maintenance and durability, how long it's going to last and how easy it is to upkeep and repair. Asphalt would be more durable, more easy to repair.
There's strengths and weaknesses to both materials. Asphalt tends to shrink and swell a bit more. That can lead to some maintenance issues, but it's also better for, it also has its strengths in that it's better for, impact absorption and also registering clearly as a trail to users. They get a much higher, the asphalt trails in the city get a much higher amount of use. So it's not one that's a clean advantage over the other. It's kind of trade-offs.
Thanks, that's all.
And the city is responsible for maintaining those, clearly.
They would be.
Yeah, and we have equipment that we can go out and spot repair things if something looks
I
bad. or-
don't know all the details, but I know that the Parks and Recreation Department already maintains a number of trails that are asphalt.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions for Brennan? Let's hear from the applicant.
Cecil Satterthwaite with Vallejo Management. And I don't know if there's any other questions. I guess my main concern is the asphalt, the 6-foot asphalt. Generally, when we do these, the sidewalk is the last thing to go in, because let the homeowners build the house and they're bringing trucks in, and you know, the sidewalk and stuff is there first. It gets broken up and all that. So where we tie into the cove, and then on the west end where we tie into Pleasant View eventually, is both concrete. So aesthetically, I think that's going to be kind of goofy, going from concrete for a strip of asphalt that's less than a mile. And my concern is, and I think it concerns the city as well, is you're going to have a drive approach, curb cuts, concrete, and then asphalt, and then concrete up to the home. And to do the asphalt, you really, it's hard to go get somebody to do a 6-foot asphalt for every 100 feet. You're gonna almost have to run that whole length. So that's one concern. And then do we do that first, which would be best for us, but as they build homes and excavate, that asphalt's gonna get broken up. And so, I mean, to me, it's gonna be a little difficult to do that. And then the other thing too is there's not a whole lot of 6-foot pavers out there. Like when 5 or 10 years down the road, it's a lot simpler to go in and take out a couple sections of concrete and replace it. But to go fix the asphalt in between driveways, and we'll do what the city wants, but that's my biggest concern is an asphalt 6-foot trail. We can do 6-foot sidewalk with concrete. I think, you know, down the road, it's gonna be easier to repair for the city and stuff like that.
So, question for you.
Yes.
On that topic. So I thought I heard in the staff report you mentioned that, and I thought it was from the applicant that you were proposing or suggesting like stamped concrete. Was that right?
Well, the color, Brandon actually suggested that. We would be okay with that. It's gonna cost a little more, but I think, and it just kind of worries me having like a half a mile or just a little over, under a mile of concrete, asphalt.
I completely understand that. So I was actually getting into this. So what would be your recommendation?
Still, we do a 6-foot, we do a 6-foot concrete sidewalk. And even if you needed to wander it or whatever, and I understand, I'm pro trail for sure, but at the same time, it just seems a little bit like even driving by there, you're gonna concrete sidewalk and then you're gonna go for, you know, just under a mile and have asphalt. I don't know how much more use it will get. And then the maintenance thing too, is like, if you have to go replace a little bit, I mean, how do you do that between a concrete approach and then a concrete driveway up to the garage?
So it sounds like you're open to some other materials then. So I guess my
Right.
third question follow-up to this would be, would other materials be a showstopper for you? If, and I know it's not in the ordinance now, and we're probably gonna hear from.
No, I'd like to drive by there and have it nice, so, but either concrete but the asphalt thing just seems, I don't know how we do that. And like, we put that in first, and then we're gonna have guys builders building the homes, and is that asphalt gonna get broken up? Because we're gonna have a hard time finding somebody to come in and put 100 feet at a time of asphalt.
I think I have a
And then
fourth
even
question then.
Yes.
So, and this is off the wall, okay, but that's what I am.
That's
So,
right.
so, you know, and I realize that's not in our ordinance now, but I mean, would you be open to some like wooden boardwalk? I say that, and I think, I know everyone's gonna laugh, but
Well,
there may be some value
and
there.
I've never really dealt with that, so I don't know the cost and even the maintenance, like in the winter, like wooden.
Yeah.
That's,
Because I'm just thinking, I heard the presentation and I heard your comments, and I see both sides of this, really, I do, but, you know, what we heard from staff, and this isn't discussion yet, I'm really asking for your input, was that, hey, that they're not used when they're just sidewalk, right? They're not as heavily used, so what would generate that interest in that,
yeah,
right? And I think stamped concrete or colored concrete would, and I literally,
and I guess the other thing too is like, if it was asphalt where the cove ends and then asphalt where we tie into Pleasant View, that would make sense, but we're just gonna have a section of asphalt for,
And how long is that again? Do you know?
well, it's, I think
You
it's
said it
just
was under
under
a
a
mile.
mile, right? It's not quite a mile. This is only a portion of it. Where we end is different property, but we own as well on the west side of that, like on phase 8 where we tie into Pleasant View. That's my biggest concern, and I don't know the best way, but to me, it just seems, how do we do that? And then even maintenance down the road for the city. Because after a couple of years, it becomes a city's, and I don't know how you go replace asphalt for 6 feet. Yeah, so,
Question I've got, is
Yeah.
does that asphalt start right at the curb, or that this trail we're talking about, does it start right at the curb, or is there
no,
some space?
there's like a 3.5 foot
Okay.
park strip.
And then that starts.
And then that starts.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant?
Was there anything else in the staff
Anything
report
else?
that you felt was?
No, we talked, Brandon talked about the block length, and we looked at all kinds of ways to put that road up, but where parcel A is, if you go up there, if you look at that, it's gonna be like 17% for only like, it's like, and you're coming to a T, so that didn't make sense to do that. We're not a whole lot over the block length, it's just the topography up there. We've had our engineers look at several different options there, that just, unless you want like a really steep road for that portion. But part of the block length requirement is for pedestrians, but so we're willing to put in that, a 10-foot walkway down through there, so.
I've got another off the wall thought
Yeah.
about this. I hear what you're saying with the asphalt. I mean, a lot of that makes sense. Another thing that I've seen that in other cities, we don't have it around here at all, that kind of designates trail and could later tie into something when you have broken concrete or whatever, is curbing on both sides. And then you have that like granite that's not dusty and it's compacted, and I don't know if you've seen that before.
More of a gravel
And that,
type.
yeah, it's not really a gravel. It's like,
It's decomposed granite.
yeah, it's almost like these little tiny chips of granite.
I don't
Nothing
know if
can
I've
grow
seen that.
through
Is
it.
that similar to like
It's kind of gray,
rotor mill?
kind
Yeah,
of.
about that size.
Yeah,
Like similar to that?
Really similar. Have you ever seen when they rotomill bridges, the concrete on the bridges,
Yeah.
and it's just little chips?
Okay,
It's like that.
yeah.
But it's
And we're open to
granite.
stuff, but I just wanted to bring up those concerns.
well, appreciate you bringing it up. I mean, that's thoughtful.
Like 10 years down the road, I don't know how the city goes and.
Yeah, getting somebody, unless we have the equipment, getting somebody to repair 6 feet wide. If we
Yeah,
have
for-
equipment, that's
for
different,
10
but if we don't
feet.
have the equipment, then
But
that's
even
tricky.
still, when you've got the home that gets built, the dump truck,
Oh, yeah. you gotta
track
do
or
it
whatever
later.
breaks it,
Yeah,
then you go in and fix it when it's concrete. You can fix it, everything smooth, just like it was new.
Yeah.
Asphalt,
weird
you always
patches.
have a connection that's,
yeah.
and so then it ends up being lumpy, and then anytime when you patch asphalt back in, you create a weak spot in,
Yeah.
in that joint, and then you're chasing.
That's
Now
my
granted, I
biggest
don't
concern.
see this developing potholes with
Yeah.
people's feet and
A curb
bicycle
machine and
track
some,
and track
a
it.
curb machine and that granite stuff. I mean, it looks like a trail, it looks really nice, and it's pretty easy to repair, and it doesn't really get weeds in it.
So we're open to different ideas, but to me, it's like when we go and if we do the asphalt, we're probably gonna hire somebody to go do it all at once.
Yeah.
And we probably wanna do that before the homes get in there, but then, trucks bringing trusses and lumber and concrete and everything else, that's
Yeah.
probably gonna get beaten up, and then how do we fix that? Like Eric says, patches on asphalt are kind of harder than with a concrete sidewalk. You can take out a section or two and replace it, really well, but.
Yeah.
So that's my concern.
Thank you.
Mr. Bill, there would actually have to be an ordinance change to do anything other than asphalt, is that right?
That's correct. Change to the vote.
And you know what, if you remember when we went through this, wasn't this when we did your other subdivision over there, Northview? Right where your intersection is, However, this trail is on the other side, so it's not in that phase, right?
Right.
But we were trying to figure out what to do with Mountain Road back then.
Right, and so that's.
So-
Cross section, it's
Yeah, so we,
kind of a dilemma.
you know, if you remember, we went on field trip up to Skyline to look at that and figuring it out. And the tough thing is when you have houses that front as frequent as they do on this, it starts to lend back to, are these 80 or 100-foot front?
90 is the ordinance.
90?
I'd
Okay.
have to look at it.
So-
I think we're close to 100, 90 to 100.
So if you got 90 to 100 feet of lot frontage and 30 feet of that's driveway, you know,
That means there's some sections where they're gonna be, driveways are gonna be 10 feet apart or almost, you know what I mean? There's gonna be
yeah,
some really,
which granted, you can have the asphalt, but to me, if I was a homeowner, I wouldn't necessarily want an asphalt sidewalk in my driveway.
Checkerboard.
But,
Yeah, that's weird.
and, you know, kind of the layout, this is a typical subdivision, you know, with what we would deem the R110 zone, which is the smaller lot size, but
To that point, even some of the things that aren't asphalt could be weird because it's just so frequent.
Mhm.
You know, people are gonna have asphalt or concrete driveways.
yeah, so. But is there any public that would like to, let's go ahead and open up to public comment on this. If anybody'd like to address us on this item, step up to the mic and do so. All right.
The Public Works, I mean,
yeah,
Parks and Recreation
is-
Director.
yeah, I would be
Did
very
we-
interested in hearing her.
Yeah.
Her meeting started at 6:30, but is Tiffany still with us?
Her meeting did start at 6:30. She is technically still on, so that might mean she's driving there, but if she raises her hand, I will
Okay,
let her speak.
Tiffany, if you're with us, if you'd like to make a comment,
Oh, she did raise her hand.
it's all right.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep,
Just a second before I head in, but thank you, Brandon, for relaying my comments so well. As we look at this, the Parks and Rec Department is actually not opposed to a different material. Our concern is preserving the intent of a trail and the usability of a trail. So like Brandon mentioned, having an asphalt trail is more used than a widened sidewalk. And that was the reason that we had that put into the public works standards in the first place, because we've gone the circles with developers and with other people who, when we ask for a trail to go in a certain place, they say, okay, well, we would rather put in sidewalk. And it's usually for cost reasons that they would rather put in a widened sidewalk than asphalt, because asphalt costs more, or at least used to. And what we've seen happen is that no one is able to identify that as trail. So yes, it would connect to both sides of the neighborhood better, but it just doesn't get used like a trail does. And so that's our concern, but we're willing to go back and take a look at that and see if there's some kind of a compromise, such as a colored concrete or a stamped concrete or something that could go throughout the entire city in those public works standards that would be an acceptable alternative and still be able to be recognized and identified as trail. But the reason we wanted it in those public works standards is we don't want this to be something that's done on an individual basis for each and every subdivision, because we want the trail system through the city to be cohesive.
Tiffany, would lighting, do you think, accomplish that purpose? In other words, if, and I don't know the cost or feasibility of this, but if there was like some bollard lighting or some like low level lighting on that trail, would that draw some attention to it? And again, I don't know where power would draw or if that is even possible for this, but does it have to be materials?
I think the lighting would certainly help in the evening. I don't think it would help in the daytime, because as people go out and they're looking for a trail to go on, people default to asphalt. And so it would be an education thing for the city of North Ogden, and it would be a work in progress as we identified all of the concrete sidewalks in the city that are trail as trail. It would probably need to be a combination of coloring, signage, and other markers to help people understand where they're at and that it is actually trail.
I'm just thinking of that asphalt trail that runs along Pleasant View Drive, is it, I believe, by the golf course there, and it's got those bollard lights. And you know, I don't see the concrete as I drive by because it's ground level, right? But I see these these lights sticking up and I see trail there. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's concrete, right, but.
Those
And I'm not-
lights,
I don't know as bollard lighting is really good for a neighborhood or not. I don't know that, but I'm wondering if that is something.
yeah, we actually really like the look of the bollard lighting. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's due to the location, but those lights have been heavily vandalized to a point that we are no longer replacing them. We are currently testing another type of solar bollard, and the problem is the solar, that they don't have power run to them. We're testing another type of solar bollard that will be a little bit more vandal proof, but they are very expensive, almost $1,000 a piece. And it may be cost prohibitive at that point.
Tiffany, there was some discussion, I don't know if you heard it, about, the city's equipment to maintain the asphalt. Obviously, we have these asphalt pathways through our city now. And do you see that as an issue at all?
I just see it as how we maintain the rest of the city's, paths and trails. We have asphalt along Pleasant View Drive, parts of Cherry Way Trail, and at a couple of our different parks. So we have asphalt walkways in a lot of other places, and we've been maintaining those for years.
Okay, thank you.
Tiffany, one last question. Unless you're about to walk in, do you think that the usage of the trail has as much to do with the way it looks or where it goes? I mean, or is it really both? In other words, if there was a trail connecting two places of interest, don't you think that would be heavily used no matter what material it were? I mean,
I think it's a combination of both. I think when a trail looks like a trail, people go out of their way to go and use it. And then when a trail goes to somewhere, people also go out of their way to use it. So that's why we are stressing so much the consistency, because I've seen over the last, 8 to 10 years, places where the city has kind of segmented their trails, either because they change material, if something goes or it dead ends, you'll come out of an asphalt trail and you'll not know where to go because it's wider sidewalk that picks up what is the trail and you don't know it. Or you run into a subdivision that was established a long time ago in North Ogden City and the trail requirement was waived. And so that's something that we're working on, is trying to come up with a better way to have consistency in our trail system so that people can actually utilize them and it's not a jumble of mismatched pieces.
Tiffany, you mentioned signage. Can you give us some thoughts or what your thoughts are about signage and consistency and things like that? Just kind of your future view with signage for trails?
Yeah, I would see, we can look. Scott Hess, the planning director, actually got a grant that he received for wayfinding, so that we're going to work on signage that identifies, especially at intersections and crossings, that this area is a trail, as well as including maps of where you are, where you're headed, where you could go, so that when people are walking and they run into this, they go, oh, I'm on a trail and it goes to here and this is how I get there. To help, so that if you run into that at each intersection, you have guidance as to where you're headed and where the trail continues. Because a lot of the times people, like I said, they'll be on an asphalt trail in the city and they come to a street and they don't know where the trail continues. And sometimes it's even that there's a jog in the street and it picks up later. So that kind of signage will help people just understand where they're at on the trail system and how to get to where they want to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks. All right, discussion. Any
Well, I
thoughts?
think at this point, the ordinance is clear what's required. If city council wants to make some other, change that allows the public works standards to be adjusted for some other material, I think that's a secondary step than what's in our purview tonight.
Well, I think with us, where this is preliminary, we can just mention that in the motion that we're, open to something different, or, we need to talk about it. Obviously, if it's going to come through and say, well, we make a recommendation. In my opinion, I would say, the thought of an asphalt trail gets used more than concrete is because asphalt trails tend to be in more trail locations. They're not in people's front yards.
Yeah.
And so where concrete, that's typically where it's replacing a trail, is in a developed road and or subdivision. And so then people, everybody that walks in my neighborhood walks out the street, not on the sidewalk. So,
Yeah.
if we want people to use the sidewalks as a trail, then let's eliminate the sidewalks together and just have trail, one on one side and have it be treated like a trail.
I agree with that. I would love to see some sidewalk given up on one side and expanded, or, lights or whatever on the other side here. Given where this road is, I mean, this is Mountain Road. This is going to be, I've said it in here, this is going to be a jewel of North Ogden, right? You're going to bank around the mountain. You're going to have a view of the valley. You're going to be right close to the mountain. It's like, we don't get a lot of opportunities for real estate like this. And I've just had family in town, and they've been talking all about, things that are done in Utah County and where they're from in Houston and stuff. And they keep going back to these trails that is such a treasure to a community, really. And I'd love to see something, but I mean, that's obviously not what's proposed here.
But it tends to be, like you mentioned, along Pleasant View Drive. That's cool. It's got lights and everything. It's along a golf course. There's not a driveway every 50 feet.
Right.
And so that's why you feel like it's a trail.
Right.
And so I think that's a big part of it, but Mountain Road being as wide of a road as it is, that will tend to either put people on the sidewalk because they'll feel like, well, this is a big road, I'm gonna stay out of it. Or there's more traffic on it. I don't know, but I think a large sidewalk on the side, but I mean, for the practicality of it, if you have homes as frequent as we're gonna have, 90 to 100 foot frontages and that, it just makes sense to have that concrete for the driveway and everything.
Yeah, to me, it's just kind of weird to have this asphalt driveway, like that checkerboard thing, in addition to it not tying into the others, it's a bit strange, and it is in people's front yards. That being said, it feels like, at least in this particular location, a way to address that for utilization and recognition is signage. And this is gonna be a nice neighborhood. I think the applicant would be very interested in nice looking signs, low profile signs that kind of indicate,
Light
something
up
that
at
fits
night and
in.
blink
Yeah,
and say,
yeah. Pink flamingos.
Trail
and-
and an arrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
This may not be worth mentioning, but I beat this drum in here before, and I'm the guy with the weird ideas, but I think we did a disservice when this Skyline Boulevard thing was laid out. I felt like the lots should not be front facing. I didn't think we should have driveways off of there. I wanted rear facing, and you want to pull into that neighborhood, you pull into a connector road and you go up and around and back in.
Yeah.
I think we did ourselves a disservice with this, because look where we're at. Like,
Yep.
what do you do? Like,
Yep.
This is a wider sidewalk. Am I right? Is this a 6 foot
6
sidewalk?
foot. Yep.
And so that concedes, I mean, that's a nice wide sidewalk. It'll keep people out of the street. I think the reason, I use trails, I think, a lot. And I think any transition between asphalt and concrete can be a tripping hazard. And it's either frustrating for the sidewalk user or the driveway user, right? Because either way you have a transition. So we're inviting transition there. I also think stamped concrete in some senses, you like a nice smooth path. And so that's difficult. Even dyed concrete, turns pink or disappears or fades over time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So aesthetically, I think that 6 foot wide sidewalk, a nice wide sidewalk with some good signage, sort of makes sense in transition. You spend a lot of time in Park City, and they have asphalt, they have concrete, and they have Brandon's wood planks. And
just throwing stuff on the wall.
Brandon's wood planks.
That's stuck to you
That's the
now.
brand name. So I'm looking at that and thinking what I want in front of my house. And as a trail user, to Tiffany's point, it is sometimes you get to the end of the asphalt and you're like, okay, where does this trail go? Where's the asphalt? It may take you a second to be like, oh, that giant white sidewalk there is probably where I need to go. So I would probably I don't know if I'm in the majority or the minority here, but I think a 6-foot wide sidewalk in a transition where I guess it depends on what's on this side and what's on this side, right? Can we count on Pleasant View on the other side to maintain that asphalt, you know, to like, okay, that's gonna be asphalt, or are they gonna make a decision, say concrete, and then we look like, you know.
So the other feature that we haven't talked about is, but it was brought up by the applicant a little bit, is the shape of the sidewalk, meaning the meandering, which functionally serves no purpose, but if this is purely about aesthetics, right, like a curvy sidewalk tells you trail more than a straight sidewalk, and I don't necessarily know if that's a win or not, but.
The only problem is it's in somebody's front yard.
Right, yeah. If they get to edge that.
Otherwise, I'd be like, yeah, that would make more sense.
You curve for
It's in there.
40 feet, then straight across the driveway, then curve again.
Plus, I think if you, I seem to remember learning this back when I was in school about meandering sidewalks. People don't tend to really like, because they want to walk. They don't want to
Yeah, functionally, they're nothing.
have to
right?
meander
Yeah.
back and forth to get to where they're going.
Most meandering sidewalks that are built have a much tighter radius than they actually should on a curve. It should be about 10 times like, and I don't know, say an 800-foot radius, and they'll sometimes do like an 80-foot, and it just is too tight for people to enjoy walking. It's done for aesthetics, but it ends up reducing the functionality of the actual.
Well, let's, as we're not going to determine what is there, I would suggest that it seems like we're kind of all in favor to have concrete.
Yeah, the applicant raised his hand. He had a comment. I don't know if that's out of order here, but
Cecil, since you're the applicant, we let you speak one last time.
Apologize, but I guess the other thing to look at too is if you look at the cross section of Mountain Road, there is a bike lane, 5-foot bike lane on both sides.
In the road.
In the
In
road,
the road.
yeah. So we've got 5-foot sidewalk on the south end, 5-foot bike lane in the road on the south side. On the north side of the road, another 5-foot bike lane, and then, you know, either the asphalt or the concrete again on that north side.
it's a lot.
So that's, you know, for bikers and stuff, most road bikers, they're in the road.
Yep.
And we're providing bike lanes on both sides of the road. Mountain bikers or hikers, you know, I think signage is a good idea too.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I think the biggest
like
thing the
you-
wider sidewalk does, it accommodates 2 people walking side by
Hey, you
side
can talk.
while they're talking. That's
Yeah.
why I think it
So
pushes
the
them out the
width
road.
wouldn't change, but I think even down the future for the city as well as aesthetics and also maintenance is, like if you get a section of sidewalk that goes bad, then it's fairly easy to cut that and replace it, like Eric mentioned before. Asphalt patches and stuff, they just never, they're not the same.
It feels like spending money on nice signs would go a long ways,
I think so too.
especially the ones that educate people where the other trails are. The map thing that she brought up, I thought was excellent.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Would you guys be in agreement if we just sort of made a recommendation to the city council along with our motion that they be open to exploring other options and making an adjustment to the public works standards for
Well,
this particular case?
so this doesn't go on to city council, this agenda item, so
We'd have to bring
we
it
would need to
separate.
have an agenda item that addresses the code change. So I think the proper thing to do would be in the motion, approve, if it's for approval,
Mhm.
the preliminary approval of the subdivision with conditions as the engineer, with the ability to change the sidewalk to a 6-foot concrete sidewalk pending an ordinance change prior to final approval. And then we would have to go through the process to change that ordinance. And, you know, a lot of the conversation we're having tonight is really relevant to that. It's more so than the preliminary on this subdivision. So
Yeah.
I think that's how we handle the sidewalk. And then at that point, then
Seconded.
it goes on.
Is that a motion?
But is there any other discussion on the rest of the subdivision?
Can I make a technical note, just that, I don't believe this will not be coming back to you unless I'm misunderstanding.
That's right.
Yeah,
Because planning commission only takes care of preliminary at this point. There was a comment made by yourself, Eric, a few minutes ago, that our commissioner told us that it wasn't clear if that was.
No, yeah, so we would just be making that change saying we would accept the concrete sidewalk pending that the code changes, and then when it gets to staff for final, if we've changed that ordinance, then they can accept it. Because technically, we can't accept concrete either because it's not in the ordinance.
Yeah.
So we'd have to make that change, but if we address it in the preliminary saying, we would accept that
If,
It might
pending
be,
the code change.
it might be helpful in the motion to just say an alternate design, since we don't know what that standard will be.
Yeah.
If there's a different standard.
I think everything else pretty straightforward. I think the road to the west is gonna stay dead ended for a while, right? Because
Yeah, we don't own,
there's about 8 acres there that
yeah,
you're skip, and then you're on the other side.
yeah, and I don't know where.
And isn't there a home there?
What's that?
The Hollis's home, isn't it? Is it in that path?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit south of the path,
Oh, it is? Oh, okay.
not much, but it would go through there eventually. And I don't know, what's that subdivision that's in there going now? I don't think it goes all the way this far north.
The one by Henry Walker Homes, they will connect.
Yeah, they
will catch
connect
will
to it.
Clip it just a little bit, yeah.
Kind of similar to your other, I think, the bottom half of the right of way. So, any other discussion? Commissioner Ankara, you got a page full of notes, so it looks like you're
Well,
ready.
We gotta include this in some kind of
I
motion.
tried to streamline this.
So I'll
By
make a
bringing up
motion.
boardwalks?
I'll make a motion that we grant preliminary approval of the Northview Estates subdivision phase 9, subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report. And also add a note that we would add the ability to change the required asphalt trail, the requirement for the asphalt trail to concrete or another material pending a code change to the public works standard. Can I cover it?
I think that covers it.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any other discussion?
Can I add just one comment from
Sure.
Tiffany texted me?
Okay,
So I'm just gonna read her comment. It was about that a street front is a strange place for a trail. So she says, I agree. We prefer that trails run along a trail system, usually between lots and in the backyards where driveways are not a problem. Obviously, it doesn't work for this subdivision. In the past, this has been disliked by developers who would like to preserve this space for their lots. The consensus was to allow a widened sidewalk. This led to the change in the public works standards because a 6-foot sidewalk is not recognized by trails residents. So.
okay. Yes, it's a struggling battle. Grow homes and put trails somewhere. Okay, any other discussion? Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Lund,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So that will move on. Staff, if you weren't aware, Cecil, staff does final approval now, doesn't come back to us. If you want to change that, you might want to push to,
We do have time before that sidewalk decision is made,
okay,
but anyway, whatever you guys decide or city council decides.
yeah, I would love you to be involved with that. You know, talking to Scott, or whatever, we can get on the agenda item just simply because you or the people you represent own the majority of Mountain Road that's yet to be developed in the city. So as we've talked before, so that would be good. All right,
Can you tell me who seconded the motion?
I did.
Johnson. All right, let's move on to our amended agenda item 7, which used to be 6. Site plan review 2022-4. Consideration and action regarding an administrative application for site plan approval for townhomes located approximately 2031 North Washington Boulevard. Presenter is Brandon Bell. Brandon?
Thank you, Chair Thomas. So this is for site plan approval for some townhomes that are essentially an extension or addition to an existing project that's gone up starting in 2018. The approvals were sought. The there's currently, I believe, 30 townhomes that are constructed or near completion, and then they're applying to add 10 more to that, to the current plan for the site. The the applicant needs to submit a companion subdivision application for this. The property that they're proposing this site plan for is not currently a part of the property that the townhomes are on. At least some of it is not. And so they need to actually separate a portion of an existing parcel and combine it with the parcel that the other townhomes are on. And I'll actually go a little bit more into that later, because we think it affects kind of one of the definitions that's applied. And so the applicant has an application for a rezone that's also going to be, let's see, that's been approved by the city council, subject to site plan approval and then also the subsequent subdivision application. Any approval granted for this site plan should be subject to the approval of that subdivision as a condition of approval. So at the most basic level, attached units are permitted use in the R4 zone, for which site plan approval is required by the Planning Commission, which is why we're here on this item tonight. And then regarding setbacks, the front yard setback is not applicable to these additional units, as there's no frontage that is part of the extension of the Majestic Views townhomes. With regards to the side setback for the project, that would fall under other main buildings, the other main buildings category in the R4 zone, and the other main, and they do meet that side setback. Additionally, that applies to, it does meet the rear setback. However, there's an additional setback that comes into place that requires not just 20 feet for the rear setback, but 30 feet, given the fact that it's adjoining parcels that are not part of this development. And so there's a 30-foot setback that I'll be getting to in just a moment. The maximum height allowed for these type of buildings is 35 feet, and the buildings that are proposed are 24.5 feet in height, and they therefore meet the building height requirement. The townhomes that are being proposed are exactly the same facades as have been approved, and so they're compatible with those. The project fits under the there's two types of attached dwelling units that are permitted. The first is small lot attached dwelling units. The second is neighborhood attached dwelling units. These would fit under the neighborhood attached dwelling units as the total site area for the project as a whole, which includes the existing townhomes that have already been constructed. The site area is 4 acres and under that 5 acre maximum. There's a requirement for a design theme. The design theme was established with the construction of the existing townhomes, and as they're already in place, and that again, the design of the proposed townhomes will be the same as the prior phase. We can, if you'd like to look at the elevations of those townhomes, they're available in Exhibit C. The required setback should be 30 feet. This is the provision that I mentioned a moment ago, that because this entire parcel is a property where the townhomes would abut to development on different parcels, and so all of the townhomes do meet that 30-foot setback, so it's not an issue. But but 30 feet is the requirement. The plan also meets the required distance between buildings, which is the 20-foot story or 20 foot for 2-story buildings. And then the height of the buildings are required to be meet the maximum height, which is again 35 feet. And they're well under that 35 feet or 24.5 feet. There's requirements regarding materials for the R4 zone, and the materials proposed on the townhomes meet those required materials of being hardy board, stucco, and rock. There is a requirement for a developed common activity area for single family and attached dwelling units, and it spells out how those should be provided, what the requirements for that developed common activity area is. It does state that at a minimum, developed common activity area shall include either a playground with play equipment or pathways with benches and tables through a natural planted landscaped area. Common activity areas shall be configured to provide appropriate, accessible, and usable spaces. And so responding to that comment specifically, the applicant should provide, staff is of the opinion that to meet this requirement that staff needs to, the applicant needs to provide a playground with play equipment or pathways with benches and tables through a natural planted landscape area. There's not really, I don't think that there is leftover natural area, and so staff's of the opinion that the applicant needs to actually provide a playground with play equipment as a condition of, as recommended condition of approval. Just 1 second. There's also a requirement that that with regards to phases, that each phase of development shall provide its own proportionate required open green space needed for that phase. Staff is of the opinion that this doesn't qualify as a separate phase. Some of the documents the applicant submitted use the term phase 2, but staff doesn't believe it qualifies as a separate phase for multiple reasons. One, on a technical, like legal side of things, they're actually not subdividing a property to have a separate parcel. They're actually, for the project, they're actually enlarging this parcel and taking property from another, first of all. Second of all, they're using the same public utilities, parking, and storm detention resources and facilities for the project. And so what we're essentially saying is it's a modification of the existing project of the development, just an extension to it, as opposed to like a separate phase. It's all constructed with different utilities and different parking, et cetera. So we're not of the opinion that would be reasonable to apply that portion of the ordinance would be reasonable to apply to this site plan. But we do believe that the requirement regarding the playground with play equipment should be a requirement for it, since we're not aware of one being on the property at present, and that is a requirement under the current ordinance. The next requirement revolves around the space that's required for attached units. The required area for the development as a whole, and we include the existing 30 units, is 80,000 square feet. So for 40 total units is 8,000 square feet. The area of the project exceeds that above requirement at approximately 180,000 square feet. And then the project is within the maximum density of the zone and an overall 10 units to the acre. So there's also requirements regarding parking, which is 2 per dwelling unit plus 1 visitor's parking space for every 2 dwelling units. The project meets the parking requirements listed above when the development is considered as a whole. There's regarding requirements for landscaping, there's requirement for 6 deciduous trees and 1 evergreen tree for each residential building. And then also 10 shrubs, and 4 of which need to be a flowering shrub for each residential building. So when you take all the additional buildings that are being added, the applicant should add 8 flowering shrubs, 12 additional shrubs total, and 12 deciduous trees and 2 evergreen trees to meet that landscaping requirement for these buildings. A landscaping plan should be required, and staff recommends that that issue can be delegated to staff for approval of that landscape plan, showing the additions of the trees. Of note, one thing that we do come across though is that the trees are required in our ordinance to be 2-inch caliper or greater. That's on the higher end of what is sometimes provided, but that's something that we work to require, and so the applicant should be aware of that we need to provide 2-inch caliper trees in order to get approval of those when we do a landscape inspection. Additionally, also one note that I didn't mention about the playground is that staff recommends that can be delegated to staff for approval as well. And then regarding exterior lighting, the location of the light poles on the site plan has not been provided, unless I missed something in the improvement drawings, but those need to be submitted. Maximum 600-foot spacing between light poles is permitted, and the design of the actual light poles will be approved as part of building permits, and as such may be delegated to staff as well. Staff recommends as a condition of approval that the location and design of the light poles be submitted prior to approval submitted for approval prior to issuance of the first building permit. So we do need to have that in place prior to issuing one of those permits for the townhome buildings. There are a couple of other issues that are not strictly city issues, but that affect jurisdiction that UDOT has. In the approval for the prior portion of the development, UDOT required that the applicant provide another connection to the north and close the existing vehicular access onto Washington Boulevard when there's opportunity to do so and for another connection. The design of the current extension of the project preserves the possibility for an additional connection to Washington, but does not make that connection. It allows it to continue to be a possibility, doesn't close it off, but it doesn't actually complete another connection.
Question regarding that.
Okay.
So this comes to a hammerhead at the north, right?
Correct.
Is that 2050? Is that gonna have an address or is it literally just a turnaround? Is that
It wouldn't have an address as a street. It would not. It's first of all, it's a private drive, but it's a turnaround as opposed to like being considered a separate street.
okay, so the access to Washington isn't slated to go down that street necessarily. It's just that it can continue on.
Correct.
Right.
It could continue on. It may or may not.
Sure, certainly. And then regarding, sorry, but this is related to that hammerhead area. So therefore, given that it's a hammerhead turnaround and not a street, do the side setbacks not apply to, what is that? Parcels 35 and 40. So I just want to make sure that we have enough setback.
Pull up the plat, John.
Because I don't know if
You
that's.
mean
really
from the
considered-
street?
Well, yeah, I don't know if that's considered a corner lot, for example, lots 40 and 35.
No, because it's a private street. So
So they don't need a setback there.
No, the side setbacks are provided from other developments is the shortest way that I know how to say it. And they're the 30 feet on the exterior.
Okay.
So
So the purpose of this private drive at the north is literally just to turn around for dump trucks, fire trucks, and bigger vehicles.
and other residents and visitors to the site.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So staff recommends that, the extension of the private drive and the additional units should be subject to UDOT approval. Staff recommends as a condition of approval that the applicant needs to provide an updated approval from UDOT in writing permitting approval of the extension of the private drive and continued use of the access onto Washington Boulevard given the proposed additional units. Point being is that UDOT said, they provided a approval, given that they, that they would connect to Washington when possible. This doesn't preclude future connection to it, but they're also adding additional units, which the concern about the current connection to Washington is its closeness to the street just to the south. I think it's 2000 North, and so they're adding an additional 10 units in the cars that go with that, and UDOT should have the opportunity to weigh in on that, to make sure they're still okay with that, since they didn't consent to the additional units in the prior approval. Then related to that issue, on the current north end of the development, there is a cross-access easement that essentially says you can't put you can't block a road from connecting to the development from another development. So that, and what that does is it allows it so the opportunity for another connection to Washington in the future would be feasible. And so what we're just saying is if you're going to move the goal post, so to speak, to the north, move that cross-access easement to the north as well, so that if someone else develops to the north in the future, that you guarantee them cross-access onto the private drive, so that a connection to Washington Boulevard would be a possibility. So a lot of times, developers will put a 1 foot protection easement on the edge of their property that says, because they're paying for the road, they don't want someone to piggyback off of their effort and investment. And so what we're saying is, in this case, because you agreed to preserve the opportunity for the continuation of the road to eventually connect to another location to Washington, you need to provide a cross-access easement, which doesn't allow you to do one of those protection strips. So that.
And that's included here.
What we're saying is that it needs to be included as a recommended condition of approval.
Is it in your bullet?
It is.
Okay.
And so the general plan map shows this area as part of the Southtown mixed use land use category. There's not a definition for that in the general plan, but there is text descriptions. The goals for the Southtown area listed in the general plan specify that it is intended to provide a support function to the downtown. And one of the goals specified for the area is to promote mixed use housing concepts that add quality developments to the area and provide more rooftops to support business. So the recommended conditions are those that I've tried to mention in the body of the report. There's not any variance from that. Let's see. The staff would, I just add one clarification that the updated approval from UDOT staff recommends that be provided prior to the recording of the subdivision. That's kind of our last trigger there. So I know there's been some more complex items in this. I tried to keep it as simple as possible, though. Is there any questions that I can make anything that's not clear a little bit more?
Yeah, can you clarify the density that you mentioned earlier? So you said that it exceeded the overall density, the project as a whole?
No, it meets it.
It meets it, okay.
Was there something unresolved in, you had like the applicant needs to verify 1 building distance to the north property line. However, there's a 30-foot setback. Is there something unresolved?
So at the time that I wrote that in the staff report, I missed one document. They did provide that information. It does meet the standard.
Okay,
So
thanks.
good catch. I appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions? Let's go ahead and hear from the applicant. Is that you guys or is that Pat? His name's on the application, but if you guys want to speak, if you're building them.
Either way, whatever you want to do.
Let the engineer do it. If all 4 of you do it, you have to sing as a quartet.
I'll sit back down. My name's Thomas Hunt. I'm the civil engineer for this project. I thought that Brandon, you covered everything pretty clearly. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to it. But.
Pat Burns, 1407 North Mountain Road. The only thing I would say, and this is you're asking us to open Pandora's box, kind of almost, with asking anything from UDOT. In my opinion, this is just my humble opinion, they said what they want, and that is open it to access onto 2300, whatever it was, and that was the original approval. I would ask not to, I've had lots and lots and lots of meetings with UDOT, and they're never fun, and they drag on and drag on. They are God of Utah. I would only ask that we go by what they've asked us to do, and that is continue on and tie it into 2300 and then close that access down when that is tied through. That's the only thing I ask is if we don't have to invoke UDOT, that's the only thing I ask. Other than that.
How do you envision that tying into 2300? Maybe I'm a little confused on that.
It'd have to continue to go north through two other people's property and then turns up into, I think it's 2300. Is that the right?
Well, I don't know. You
It's
guys-
19.
1900.
1900, sorry. I couldn't remember the name of the
Or
name.
2100, sorry.
Yeah, 2100.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what it is, yeah.
Okay.
We're all
We're-
confused.
Best is really, right?
Yeah.
Is there a light ever going to be there? I mean, that's
No, the reason
It's
they
too
wanted
close to
was
this
the
one.
light was,
too
the
close to,
access was close to the existing light.
yeah,
So when it turns, when the road is provided to go through that, it turns up to 2100.
yeah.
And so that, then it gets rid of that, that would then become a dead end with a hammerhead or something where the access point is
Yeah.
right now.
To me, it's always been a little bit weird, but there's a light there by the cannery and Kurtz, rather than a four-way intersection. It would have made a lot of sense to put the light at 2100. You know, but it is what it is.
But again, if that's what you guys want, we'll do it, but that
I-
really is a nightmare.
I would say that if it can be shown that there wasn't a unit limit or something like that when UDOT gave that approval, then I would be fine with that. If it was specific to this initial project, then we probably do need their blessing. So that would be my way of making it fair for both sides to make sure it's done right, because I know this was a battle to begin with, right, with UDOT to allow it,
Yeah, I did the traffic study back in.
just
the day.
because it's literally like 100 feet from the intersection or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Well, maybe a little more than that, but
It's a little unique, but no, really, we're not hitting any UDOT frontage at all with this, but it is what it is. I'll look through some of those previous approvals that we got by UDOT, see if there's a limit cap on that or whatnot. For recording, so.
I think that would cover it, you, John.
And I think that's the issue is they've required a traffic study and now that traffic is gonna change. And so we just want to be sure that we're being fair. And so I think if we can review the approvals and say, hey, and you know, Eric, our engineer agrees that, hey, maybe it's not required. And I think that'd probably be okay. We just want to make sure we're not gonna get ourselves in trouble with UDOT either.
Yeah, UDOT usually, once you hit a certain amount of traffic, new traffic that's being generated will require it. And this is usually under that, this will be under that threshold. And so they'll just want.
But this wasn't
a trip
this was a
generation memo.
temporary access to begin with,
Right.
not a permanent. So that's the only question is.
But, and I'm, so you can hear I'm playing both sides. Because at the same time, they also anticipated growth moving north until the connection was made. And so I think if you wanted to, you could leave it to staff and, you know, Eric and others to just, if we're all okay saying, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that rather than a blanket, go get Jay's approval. But I would say that is if you can work it out with this traffic study, something that just makes sure the city is okay, that UDOT doesn't come back and say, hey, you weren't supposed to approve that because we only gave them 30 doors or whatever.
Okay.
So
I work with them all the time, so I don't think huge issue if we go that route.
You don't think they're deity like Pat does?
I wouldn't go quite that far.
Not as bad as the railroad, let's say that.
okay, any other questions for the applicant or?
I have a comment, right?
I'm Joel Prince. Willard.
Applicant number 3.
What's that?
Applicant number
Yeah,
3.
number 3. I was just gonna say in consideration of the cross-access easement. For private property, that doesn't make any sense to me. I've seen on public property, even on that, you have to pay a percentage to access those roads, a percentage of what we put in. Somebody builds to the north of us and has free access to that, that's saving probably over $500,000 for them on roads that we put in, underground access, storm drain, all that stuff. Plus the homeowners association is not public, it's private. So we're maintaining that. So they build 30, 40, 60 units and use our roads. We're paying to maintain that. The HOA, the homeowners there are paying to maintain those roads, not the city. So I just think that's a little bit different.
The only thing that makes it tough is it was a requirement, it was a condition from UDOT to grant you the access to Washington, that road continues. And so if somebody develops to the property north and you say, oh, no, we're not going to allow that, then again, we're back to going against what your original approval required, was that road goes north. However it works out, if somebody connects and says, hey, you know, through the cross access easement, saying, hey, you got
it was okay, like, once somebody accessed to the north, and our understanding is we have to do the same thing, but if somebody built to the north of us, connected to 2100, and we had to close ours, that we may have to pay them for that access too. I guess it could go both ways, but.
And I think our recommendation in the staff report is it's only for traffic, so it's not utilities and all that kind of stuff. And so I think
Well, our maintenance is mostly traffic. I mean, we're getting that, we have to pay the seal coated every 3 to 5 years. They're gonna wear it out. And
I think what we're saying though is that the conversation is, there's still probably likely to become compensation because they're gonna want access to your water lines and other things. It's just because of the UDOT requirement that the temporary go away when there's a connection, we have to make sure that there's not a big barrier to the traffic going to the north. And so that's.
we're not objecting necessarily to that, but there should be the same thing, some type of compensation of maintenance required on the roads and stuff for their usage. And we have to foot the bill when it does go through 2100. Our agreement was to block that temporary access off. We have to pay 100% for that too. They use it for 5 or 10 years, and when that time comes, we pay 100% to block it off for everybody else. Just wanted to bring that up, that it is a little different because it's private. When I live next to a cross access easement, and we have to pay that guy. I want to buy the land in north of me. He's got a 1 foot identical to what I said, and we have to pay a percentage of what he paid to put those roads in.
So then if the only thing is, then I think if you want to put in a holding strip, then the city has some agreements. Has an outline in our code of how those are put together. They're not just whatever. So that's the only way.
Yeah, just some type of considerations. I do think it's different when it's private property. That makes it, like I said, ours, I asked that developer how much I had to pay him, and it was a percentage of what he cost paying. But it was maintained by the cities, like on top of us putting it all in, we're maintaining it as well, which to me is huge.
maybe, I would think I'd be fine if we have that cross access easement or whatever, that within that agreement that states that if the street's not turned over to public, then there's they agree to pay a percentage of maintenance, you know, whether their pro rata share of maintenance of that road. So I just, too many times also seen it the other way. Like, I don't know if that's what your neighbor is somebody wants to develop to the north and you're like, we control the access, so give me $1 million and then you can do it. And that totally goes against the condition that you got.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's what I thought with mine.
If it's a shared cost of maintenance of a private road, I have no problem with that.
And that's what I thought with mine, where I wanted to buy the land in the north. I was like, this dude's gonna want $1 million to get up there. Because that person in the north is gonna wait for you to develop below you, because if he wouldn't have waited, he would have had to pay 100%. He said, no, they have a certain percentage of X, Y, and Z that I can take 10% of what my cost was. I think it ends up being $5,000. So, I mean, they legally said what he would charge.
Yeah, as long as we can work something out that way, I think that's fine.
Because
the same thing, yeah, the same thing that you guys seek compensation for maintenance of that road for 10 more units that go up there now. So the maintenance of that is, I guess you'd look at and say, well, it's all against 50 units now instead of 40 for what maintenance costs are. But that way, at least it's not limiting access, because then it's not stifling.
Yeah, we don't want to landlock down.
The road going north.
We're hoping it'll just be us going north to 20.
Keep working on Paul.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Questions, comments?
The one thought, and you know, some of this conversation is previous to me is, you know, the intersection of 2100 and then the light, you know, and you think about future growth, how, you know, and I agree. I think working something out with the city seems possible and seems smart. But if the engineer did this traffic study and, you know, it's a 4-way intersection at 2100. It's a 3-way intersection that's helpful getting into some of our commercial hurts right now.
Well, no, none of that's the concern. The condition on approval of this original subdivision from UDOT was we'll grant you access for multiple units
Yeah.
until another road connection can be done, and then they're required to close it. So this connection in
Okay.
Washington.
I
will have to be
misunderstood that.
closed
Thank you.
Once there's another connection somewhere
Yep.
else,
Yep.
because it's too close to the light. And so
Yeah.
by his negotiating skill and ability to get UDOT to let him put a road 150 feet away from another road, you know, so that was a condition. That's
Yeah.
why that this whole
Okay.
thing
I
comes
understand
up
that better now.
is there, the access is a condition based
Yeah.
of, as soon as there's another connection, that one has to
Yeah.
close.
Because I can see 2100 as Barker's farm or whatever, you know, being used a little bit more down the road. So, but yeah, that makes complete sense.
And as a side note, it's the HOA, and I say them, because we'll obviously won't be there forever. In their CCNRs, it's written that they're
Yeah.
responsible to close
Yep.
that with its time.
Thank you.
Was this pending a zone, a rezone of the property?
Well, we did
Zone's already occurred.
we did the annexation. Wasn't it annexed in, or was it just the rezone?
And we put this in which zone?
R4. I apologize, but we didn't, as typical, we didn't open up for public. If there's any public like comment on this item, we'd open it up to them at this time. Okay. Continue our discussion. Anything or recommendation? So the items, I think, different from the staff report would be that the applicant work out with the city as far as a cross access easement determination with what was required with UDOT and some form of a future agreement that maintenance costs or whatever for their private road can be shared with the connecting party.
Yeah, so John can tell me if I'm stating this correctly, but some form of agreement be signed to preserve cross-access easement, but allowing for shared cost of maintenance of the private drives. Is that?
You're not wrong.
Because I guess it would go both ways. Well, if it stays private all the way going out to 2100, then this road gets closed and their HOA would then have to share the cost of the road all the way, the rest of the way.
And then the other one relates to the second recommended condition of approval. I would just adjust that to say that if review by staff indicates that further approval from UDOT is required, then they obtain it that in writing, an updated approval from UDOT. And if it's not,
Yeah, I think that's probably a softer requirement approach. So. Entertain a motion.
Now, I don't know if this will cover it. I might have to go back to the review by staff, but I'll make a motion that we grant conditional approval of the conditional use permit subject to the
sorry, it
conditions.
said site plan approval.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just approval of the site plan approval, subject to the conditions in the staff report, the TRC meeting letter, and the engineer's review comments. With one change to the second bullet under the recommended conditions of approval, which indicate that the applicant has to provide an updated approval from UDOT in writing, permitting the approval of the extension of the private drive and continued use of the access onto Washington Boulevard, given the proposed additional units. We would also want to adjust that to say that we'd like to delegate it to staff to review the UDOT requirements. And if they determine that, and come to some kind of agreement with the applicant, that they'll still meet the UDOT requirements for configuration of the extension of the private drive and continued use of the access onto Washington Boulevard, and also preserve the cross-access easement, but still allowing for shared maintenance costs. Does that cover it?
I think that works.
That works. You're so good at those.
Way to go.
I don't know.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Vancaro,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, item number 8, public comments. This time we'll open up for public comment. If you'd like to address the planning commission on anything, please step up to the mic and do so at this time. Do we have anybody online with us?
Oh, we do, I'm looking. Screen shrunk.
Everybody's ready to get out of here.
They're not raising their hand.
Okay,
I do have one question, and maybe it was answered on.
this is
Facebook.
comments, not questions, in case you didn't.
And it probably was on Facebook or something, just what happened to the fireworks? I never heard.
There was a malfunction at the control box.
And you can't light those with a lighter. Yeah.
I was just curious, I didn't know.
We are likely going to reschedule them for later on in the summer.
Oh.
The council was talking about the 24th, but there are weird conflicts that weekend with Piners Rodeo and stuff, so they're going to come, hopefully in the next couple of days, have an official announcement for date and time and everything.
Just curious.
It's gonna be on your birthday.
Perfect, I like that.
All right, anything from planning commissioners?
Yes, I have something. I was going to make a motion and I can't find it. One of the reasons I was late was I got reading the minutes, which I didn't attend. Oh, there it is. I found it. I need to make a motion to amend the minutes. I know you guys have already approved them, but they're inaccurate. On the May 4th minutes on page 7. I was not in attendance.
Here's a fun rule.
Okay.
So you would technically make a motion to reconsider the motion approving the minutes.
I would like to make a motion to reconsider the motion to approve the minutes.
And that would be seconded.
Okay, that's
And then-
tabling out there.
I'll second it.
And then
We have a
you would
motion and a
vote.
second to readdress item number 2, minutes consideration.
So yeah, so you would, and then you would vote yes or no, and if you say yes, then you would make your motion on the amendment to the minutes,
Okay.
for example.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we.
We had a motion and a second already.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, let's
Nice Wisconsin.
reconsider item number 2, the minutes consideration. Consideration action to approve the May 4th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting minutes and June 1st, since we approved them together.
I move that they be approved pending a change to the May 4th minutes on page 7, where earlier in the minutes, it mentioned that I was absent from the meeting, which I was, but it has me voting in the affirmative on item number, goodness gracious, which one is that?
You've got some yeses and nos in the same one.
Well,
Some ayes and
I'm
nays.
absent.
Yeah,
yet
absent and then a
I'm-
yes.
I
or
have an
something.
I vote.
I noticed that like in the middle of the meeting.
Okay, so I believe this is item number 7. So that needs to reflect that I was absent, and Chairman Thomas, were you present in that meeting? Yes, so it has Chairman Thomas as absent and Chairman Mason as voting aye. That needs to be flipped to where Chairman Mason was absent, Chairman Thomas was an aye, I'm assuming, I wasn't there.
Ace doesn't want credit for not being there.
Right. I mean, it wasn't right, I didn't vote for it.
Okay, we have a motion to make that correction and approve the remaining minutes.
Pending that correction, I'd like to move that we approve those minutes.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second to amend the May 4th minutes and approve June 1st. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Can we, for the record, keeping back up for a minute? Commissioner Nancaro made the motion to approve the last item, the townhomes. Who seconded that?
Lund, I did.
Commissioner Lund.
Okay, and then there was the motion to reconsider, I believe Commissioner Mason made that.
Made it.
I second.
And then Johnson second. Okay, and then. And then the last motion to approve the adjustment was made by Commissioner Mason and then second by Lund. Okay.
Cool.
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that one, because I love that there was a friendly amendment proposed. It was denied. I love a
It
little
was
bit
a
of.
friendly denial.
Well, earlier you said in the meeting, you said, are we all in agreement with this? And I seriously wanted to come in and say, it doesn't matter if we're all in agreement. We don't have to be. Like, I love a little bit of opposition. Like,
All right, any other remarks from commissioners? Being that it is the summer and holiday season, is any conflicts with our next meeting,
what day is that?
20th of July?
No, I'll be here. We're leaving next morning.
You know, at one of the last few meetings, the staff had mentioned that they wanted to do some training in July. Is that still on the agenda for next?
Actually, I might be gone then.
We are working on scheduling a training. Multiple trainings. We don't have dates. As you recall, there's requirement for 4 hours of training for planning commissions on an annual basis. We don't have a date scheduled, but we're working on some potentially regarding public improvement districts. We're also, this isn't like an announcement officially that we would do this, but Scott and I have talked about, so we're doing it so that one meeting a month is a training type meeting, and where you're, not that it's more legislative formally, but helping give training and then generating ideas and brainstorming relating to code adjustments, things like that. And then one would be more active, and that would, there are other cities in the state that do that. And if you recall, when we had the Brent Bateman training, we talked about, planning commission should really be taking on a legislative role. Purpose of that potential adjustment would be to move more in that direction. So
I think it's a great idea. And you guys have been doing a great job of streamlining some of this stuff. So I've noticed, some of the things you guys have been doing, and it's been really good.
Well, I know that some of our recommended conditions of approval can get a little complex. We try to simplify as best we can, but yeah.
I appreciate you put it all in there, because I don't have to try to include all that stuff in the motion, like, what is not in there that I have to add to a motion,
Well, I try to keep it as simple as possible. I don't always succeed in my reports, but I know it can feel like you're, signing away your firstborn child in 20-page contract signed in blood, right? So, yeah.
Okay, any other comments? Brandon, do you have anything else for us?
No, I think that covers it.
I move we adjourn.
John?
Just one thing. So we normally invite you to the summer barbecue. It's there's weird conflicts this year, so we will make sure you have the date, but there's a chance it won't be at the pool this year because of the conflicts. The night we had originally reserved, like a whole bunch of employees are out of town for training. And we feel like we should have people there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Maybe just some burgers and hot dogs and fireworks, huh?
yeah, or just and some stuff. Or things at a park, games and other type of activities. But we will update you on that as we get a firm date dialed in. So
Okay.
Love the new park up. I can't remember the name of it, but the new
McGriff.
yeah,
The pirate
my
theme.
kids love it. The pirate theme and that little thing with the game, the ball thing. I don't know if anyone
yeah,
else
the
has
Gaga
seen it.
ball. Yeah.
Yeah, that's read that sign. It's interesting. We were like, maybe we should put one of these in our backyard. It was
Yeah,
kind of fun.
They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, so great job on that.
It's all Tiffany and Jesse and that group. They really and they're starting to go more themed. And a lot of cities you'll see are doing more themed because it creates a destination. And that park is designed for toddlers. So it's smaller but there's more tactile stuff to do as opposed to a big swings and slides and stuff.
Where they added the trees.
Yeah, it's the only
everything.
park when any of my kids have got stitches, so.
It is.
On the rocks at that Bowery.
Mountain View, broken arm. Not me, it was my neighbor.
I say, Oak Lawn Broken Heart.
Well, would you like to add to that, or are we got anything else? John?
No.
All right. Do you still have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, that's dangling out there.
We have a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.